Our trip begins in the vibrant city of Buenos Aires, Argentina. Although time was limited, our tour guide showed us the highlights of this exciting and diverse city. We saw marvelous architecture, landmarks, and lovely parks. But the highlight had to be the unique Recoleta Cemetery compressed by the city itself. Where Eva Perón is buried in a simple mausoleum along with the remains of her sister's family. Born in poverty, Evita was the First Lady from 1946 until her death in 1952. She was so adored by the people, upon her death, she was given a royal funeral where thousands gathered to honor her. The next day, we boarded the Sea Explorer, along with 112 other excited adventurers, plus 72 crew, and headed out to sea. The ship was equipped with ice-strengthened, reinforced hull, high-tech instrumentation, and very experienced crew of sailors, plus a variety of Antarctica specialists. The vessel would be our refuge for the next 3 weeks. Fortunately, our stateroom was well appointed with ample space for us, plus camera gear, toiletries, and heavy clothing. The common areas like the well-stocked library, lounge, and cafe were most welcoming. There was also a gym and beauty salon, both of which you can tell I never used. We enjoyed wonderful meals, especially desserts, in the dining room, or ate al fresco when weather permitted. Large gatherings for lectures or other group activities were held in the auditorium, including the mandatory issuing of the rubber boots. Sometimes we were just walking around the deck, watching the many different kinds of seabirds that escorted us.
Skybird, make your sail, and every heart will know of the tale, and head for the farthest shore. Songbird, make your tune, for none may sing it just as you do. And make your song be heard. Look at the way I glide, caught on the wind's lazy tide, sweetly how it sings. Rally each heart at the sight of your silver wings. Skybird, skybird.
Having left Buenos Aires en route to the Falklands, we seemed to be tracing an infamous voyage that began almost to the day 99 years earlier. In 1914, Sir Ernest Shackleton, knighted by the King of England for his 2 previous successful explorations in Antarctica, embarked on his most daring mission to cross the frozen continent overland from west to east. Originating from London, the ship named Endurance stopped in South America to restock supplies. In addition to provisions and expedition leader Shackleton, on board were the ship captain and officers, many specialists, ship crew, plus 1 cat and 69 Canadian sled dogs. Like us, his team departed Buenos Aires in late October 1914, heading southward. Join us as we trace Shackleton's voyage to see some of what he would have experienced along the way. After traveling in the Argentine Sea for 4.5 days and 1,182 nautical miles, we see land. The Falklands consist of 2 large islands plus about 700 small ones. The Falklands is a territory of the United Kingdom and has been under British rule since early 1832. Finally, we landed on the small West Point Island, which has been continually inhabited by the Napier family since 1879. We hiked up the 1.5 miles to Devil's Nose, and certainly were not in shape for this steep hike, especially overloaded, toting too much gear and heavy coats. But at last we reached the top, and it was well worth the effort to see thousands of black-brown albatrosses and several hundred adorable rockhopper penguins who call this home. Well, home when not out at sea for 6 months during the winter. Although they reside together, it does not mean that there are no territorial squabbles for choice spots. Just because they are only 15 inches tall, they have an attitude and hold their own against the bigger albatross, who often have to run the gauntlet. Sometimes there is payback. At last, this albatross makes it to a nice rock and prepares for takeoff. Early mariners believed the souls of drowned sailors were reincarnated as albatrosses and feared that killing one would bring bad luck. And off he goes, soaring with a near 8-foot wingspan. Now the rockhopper sees this and tries his wings, but no go. Best if he just stays with the female. And speaking of, these two albatrosses are engaged in a courtship display. Breeding pairs will stay together for several years. During the night, we moved to the main island, stopping at the town of Stanley, which is the governmental seat of the Falklands. Upon landing, we watched some Peel's dolphins frolicking in the bay. Several ducks, and a most ingenious gull breaking open food by dropping it down onto the dock. We walked around town where the locals say 2 or 3 cars on the same street is traffic. Then we took a nature walk up to Gypsy Cove to see a variety of birds, including turkey vultures perched on the pretty rock outcroppings. As we continue tracking Shackleton's voyage in the Endurance, heading toward South Georgia, we spend a snowy day and one of many turbulent nights to come jostling around in the Southern Ocean. When it became too dangerous to be on the deck, we retreated inside and watched the angry waves slam against the midship porthole. Thankful for a calmer day, we passed only Shag Rock, which is a cluster of 6 small islands situated 620 miles from where we had just been in the Falklands. During downtime, we were chronicling the trip, downloading pictures on the computer, reading, charging batteries, watching for land, attending lectures, and dreaming of penguins. At last, we reached the British territory of South Georgia. I could hardly contain my excitement. We hopped on the Zodiacs to Salisbury Plain, the second largest king penguin colony, home to over 250,000 king penguins, hundreds of elephant seals, as well as many fur seals. The penguins seemed to be excited to see us as a welcome party gathered on the beach. King penguins are the second largest species at over a yard tall, weighing almost 30 pounds. Inquisitive creatures too approached Tim to get a better look at him. And each of these had to file by to inspect my chair. Although the inhabitants all seemed to get along, despite their cute faces, the fur seals have a cantankerous personality and dangerous bite. These seem to be arguing about something. Oh, this one is coming at us too fast and too close. Penguins have a bit of trouble walking, but their big feet act as rudders while their wings or flippers propel them with ease in the ocean. Also, the seal struggles in the shallow water. But is quite at home in the ocean. The penguins watched our departure as if to wish us goodbye. And then they too took to the sea. Upon landing on the beach of the very protected Pryon Island, we traversed past many annoyed fur and elephant seals who threatened us with grunts and posturing. Because of the environmental sensitivity, we were limited to views from a boardwalk leading up to a nesting site for a wandering albatross baby. This cute chick watched us with cautious interest but could not leave the nest yet. The wandering albatross is the largest flying bird. Although it takes 13 months to mature, once the juvenile bird leaves the nest, its 11.5-foot wingspan is well adapted to open ocean flight. When the young one leaves the nest, it will not return to touch land again for 5 to 6 years. Then it will spend most of its life in flight for a lifespan of over 50 years. After our descent, we were met by the same disgruntled elephant seal and the same barking fur seal. In the distance, we could see gentoo penguins. As they are the least aggressive, they are less noisy. We watched a couple of the darling 12-pound penguins who came ashore, waddling up the beach. Upon leaving, we watched the antics and interaction of a huge male elephant seal, 3 females, and his pups. Plus 1 tiny but highly protected pipit bird. Then the next stop, like Shackleton's Endurance, was into King Edward Cove. Reports of the abundant marine life in this area started a massive slaughter of seals, and when they were nearly gone, the focus shifted to whales. We arrived at Grytviken, a long-abandoned whaling station. So when they were decimated by 1964, the town died along with them. Such as these whale oil tanks and broken boats. Grytviken has haunting, rusted relics of the past. There is a pretty old whalers' church and a small museum in town. Except for the few administrative officials assigned here, there are no permanent residents. However, some wildlife has returned. Balancing them on their feet, these penguins are carrying precious eggs for a new generation. It also has a small but significant cemetery, but more about that later. I was amused at the irony how humans kill the animals, which killed the town, but now look who has the last laugh. We departed Grytkoven as Shackleton had done in November years before us, heading for Antarctica. But with penguins on our mind, we had other stops to make en route. So we relocated to another side of the island and lowered the Zodiacs. Upon arrival at Gold Harbor, seals lined the coast. The male bull elephant seal can weigh about 4 tons, while the females are a quarter of that. These two huge males were fighting for dominance over breeding rights. The bulls will defend their territory and harem with great vigor. The others were in a heightened state of arousal with potential challengers all around. The dominant male is called the Beachmaster. Combat can be violent with mighty blows to the face and neck. This fighting is also dangerous to the much smaller female and her 1-month-old pup. In this state of agitation, they can be aggressive to humans. Note the man with his cane. Now see who has it. They don't call this Gold Harbor for nothing. There are a lot more things to see than just seals. There were king penguins everywhere, with about half being the fluffy brown chicks. Lots of penguins. Lots of penguins. Early explorers called the young chicks Oakham boys because of the resemblance to the youth back home who packed the wooden boat seams with tarred cotton fiber that often stuck to them. Although the adults were not afraid of us, the babies seemed especially interested in the human visitors. Both parents rear the chick, which takes over a year, but these are being weaned, so they constantly beg for food. Adults can dive deep for food, but those who are molting must wait to eat, so no more food for the youngsters either. This lucky one may be getting one of his last meals from the mom and dad. Plus a bit of unwanted pruning as well. between the kings and seals, we hardly notice the invading skua, who are predators of penguin eggs and small chicks. This cute baby seal was most intrigued by Tim's camera case and in fact tried to pull it away.
We all practiced this, Val. Now I get it. You made me look like a fool.
So like Shackleton's Endurance, we left South Georgia heading into the Scotia Sea. For the next 2 days, the ship fought with the sea. We were thrown around with such a violent force that I thought the hull would crack. A lovely rainbow brought hope for better things to come. And it was so exciting to start seeing icebergs and watch the whales. In the distance, we could see Elephant Island, part of the South Shetlands. This mountainous, ice-covered island is famous in the Shackleton saga. Finally, calmer seas, the ship dropped anchor near Point Wild, and we were off in the Zodiacs to explore around the coastline. Chin-strap penguins line the mountaintops. At 9 pounds, standing 30 inches tall, these small penguins use their beaks and sharp claws to climb 330 feet to the highest part of the rocky slopes. Although it's really a line of black feathers, chin-strap penguins looked like they were smiling as they watched us from the rookery. We could see a statue of someone who plays a significant role in our story. As our attention was to stop at Elephant Island, Shackleton's team continued further south. However, after several months at sea and nearing his goal, his ship entered pack ice and became hopelessly embedded in the frozen waters of the Weddell Sea. The men camped on the ice near the ship for 9 months, but the shifting ice finally crushed the ship, and the Endurance sank on 12/23/1915. So Shackleton and the team made their way across the ice until it broke up. Then they rowed 3 boats in open water toward Elephant Island. Now at this point, with no other options, he and 5 of his crew left the others on the island, and they made their way in a 22-foot boat traveling nearly 800 miles in turbulent sea back to South Georgia. After 3 failed rescue attempts by others, Captain Louis Pardoff returned Shackleton to Elephant Island on August 30th, 1916. Miraculously, the entire remaining crew had survived. It has been said, when disaster strikes and all hope is gone, get down on your knees and pray for Shackleton. So this statue is the bust of the Chilean sea captain who took Shackleton back to Elephant Island to rescue his men. So we headed back to the ship. En route to our next stop, we watched more whales. Today we pulled into the bay for King George Island. The largest of the South Shetland Islands, it has several scientific bases. Despite the freezing weather, the Zodiacs were lowered and we were off to explore the coastline. We were greeted by a darling Adele penguin. Most of the ones we saw were near the shore, probably because 90% of their life is spent at sea, where they can dive to a depth of over 500 feet. They are social birds. Not only do they nest and feed in colonies, they often go to and from the sea in groups, partially as protection from their main predator, the leopard seal. Finally being convinced there was no danger, one at a time they headed out to sea. These were just coming back from feeding. Then have to make their way back up the hill. We watched the penguins' slow and laborious walk up the hill, and then those coming back down to the sea. They made it easier by using belly slides. This form of locomotion not only looked more efficient, but fun, too. We then walked over to the Polish Artowski Research Station, where we mailed a postcard that took 3 months to deliver back in the U.S. We bid goodbye to the friendly Adele penguin, and then we're off to our next stop at Half Moon Island. We gathered on shore and made a long, slow, difficult hike up the hill to the Chinstrap Penguin Rookery. The red lichen growing on the rocks was a pretty contrast to the otherwise black and white scenery. But we had climbed the steep hill to see the penguins. Research in carbon dating has found that the penguins have been returning to the same nesting sites for 44,000 years. Also at the rookery is a lone macaroni penguin named Kevin, who has been returning here for the last 7 years. Plus, the snowy sheathbill hangs around, but that's because they are predators, and this is a rookery. First, the males arrive at their breeding grounds to build their simple nest of stone in a shallow depression from the previous year. So this penguin heads uphill to go get his special stone. Once the stone is selected, he will take it back down and put it in the nest. The stone nest is important because they protect the eggs from rolling and help keep them warm. Rocks are often presented as courting gifts, like a man would give a woman a diamond. There is always a lot of noise about theft of stones. The stones are so important that some females appear to be involved in prostitution, having sex in exchange for stones or stealing stones. If the female is pleased with her partner's rock in the nest, courting begins. Usually the penguins get along, but they can fight viciously. With all the noise back at the rookery, Tim finds solace with one penguin. On the shore, there were a few Waddell seals, weighing about 1,000 pounds. Even though they look lazy, they can dive down to 1,312 feet deep. As we continue toward our destination, we notice more ice is forming at the shoreline. The ever-moving sea ice forms in cold, open oceans where there is a constant flow of currents and winds. As we cruised carefully past the forming iceberg, we spotted a group of gentoo penguins. To get a closer look at this frozen world, we took a zodiac ride around the icebergs. The various shapes and sizes of the icebergs were beautiful. But were somehow haunting from underneath. In the distance, we see the massive frozen continent of Antarctica, which is the coldest, windiest, and driest place on Earth with no human population. Except for a little coastal area, it is 99% ice covered. First noted by Captain James Cook in 1768, he said the lands were doomed by nature to perpetual frigidness. Despite horrid weather, we excitedly reached the edge of the continent of Antarctica. In knee-deep snow, we scrambled to climb a short distance up the mountainside. Now we head across the dreaded Drake Passage. This 400-mile wide channel that separates Cape Horn from the Antarctic Peninsula is notorious for its frequent high winds and rough seas. And the reputation of the Drake Passage did not fail. There are two things on a ship, things that are on the floor and things that will be. From a dead sleep, I was literally catapulted out of bed not once but twice, resulting in a visit by the ship's doctor. At last, the angry sea relaxed its hold on our ship, and we could see Tierra del Fuego in the distance. We arrived in the world's most southerly city, Ushuaia, Argentina. Where we disembarked the ship. After a brief walk around town, we end our amazing trip. But this is not the end of the story. Stopping again at Grytgeveen on his fourth trip to Antarctica, Ernest Shackleton suffered a fatal heart attack. Here at his grave at the Whaler Cemetery, we paid homage to a legendary explorer, but will be forever thankful we were not on his ship. Although the quest was an epic failure, history has remembered Ernest Shackleton's journey for the heroic story of remarkable perseverance, leadership, and survival. And we too will remember our wondrous trip tracking Shackleton to Antarctica. Much thanks to the ship, guides, and crew. The adorable wildlife. Special appreciation to Thomas Cota, our trip organizer and friend. And thankful for a safe passage.